the day humanity nearly went extinct. Today, more than 8 billion humans live on Earth. We build cities visible from space. We cross oceans in hours. We communicate instantly across continents. Our species dominates nearly every environment on the planet, from frozen polar regions to scorching deserts. Humans have spread farther than any of our ancestors could have imagined. Looking at the modern world, it is easy to believe that humanity's success was inevitable. It was not. The story of our species is not a story of constant progress. It is a story of survival. A story filled with disasters, climate changes, predators, disease, famine, and uncertainty. And according to a growing body of scientific evidence, there was a moment in the distant past when everything almost ended. A moment when humanity came frighteningly close to disappearing forever. If events had unfolded slightly differently, every city, every nation, every language, every invention, every piece of art, every book, every song, and every person alive today might never have existed. The evidence for this extraordinary claim was not discovered in an ancient temple. It was not found buried beneath a lost city. It did not come from legends or myths. Instead, it came from something carried inside every living human being. DNA. The story begins with a mystery. When scientists first started comparing human DNA from populations around the world, they noticed something unusual. Humans are remarkably similar to one another, far more similar than many other species. Two people from opposite sides of the planet may look different on the surface, but genetically, they are astonishingly alike. In fact, chimpanzee populations living in different parts of Africa often show more genetic diversity than the entire human species. To geneticists, this raised an important question. Why would a species that occupies the entire globe possess such limited genetic variation? The answer appeared to point toward a dramatic event in the distant past. At some point, the human population may have been reduced to a very small number of individuals. A genetic bottleneck. Imagine pouring a vast river through the narrow neck of a bottle. Everything must pass through a tiny opening. On the other side, the river continues, but much of its original diversity is gone. Scientists believe something similar may have happened to humanity. The ancestors of all modern humans appear to have passed through an extremely small population thousands of generations ago. The exact numbers remain debated. Some estimates suggest a breeding population of only a few thousand individuals. Others propose numbers even lower. Whatever the true figure may have been, the conclusion remains startling. Humanity once stood on the edge of extinction. To understand how this happened, we must travel back tens of thousands of years. The world was a very different place. There were no cities, no farms, no roads, no written language, no nations. The earth belonged to nature. Vast grasslands stretched across continents. Ancient forests covered enormous regions. Gigantic animals roamed landscapes that modern humans would barely recognize. Mammoths walked across northern plains. Giant cats stalked prey through tall grasses. Massive herds migrated across territories untouched by civilization. And somewhere within this dangerous world lived small groups of early humans. They possessed no metal tools, no permanent settlements, no advanced technology. Every day was a struggle. Food had to be found. Water had to be located. Shelter had to be secured. Predators had to be avoided. Children had to survive. A single injury could become a death sentence. A single failed hunting season could mean starvation. Life was fragile. Yet despite these hardships, human populations slowly expanded. For thousands of years, our ancestors adapted to changing environments. They learned, they cooperated, they survived. Then something happened. Something that may have pushed our species closer to extinction than ever before. The clues point toward one of the most powerful natural disasters in the history of Earth, a supervolcano. On the island of Sumatra in present-day Indonesia lies a vast lake known as Toba. Today it appears peaceful. Tourists visit its shores. Boats move across its waters. Villages sit nearby. At first glance, there is little to suggest that this tranquil landscape was once the site of unimaginable destruction. But beneath the lake lies the scar of an ancient eruption. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano exploded. The eruption was unlike anything witnessed during recorded human history. It was not merely a large volcanic eruption. It was a super-eruption, a geological event so powerful that it altered environments across enormous portions of the planet. Scientists estimate that thousands of cubic kilometers of material were blasted into the atmosphere. Ash spread across vast regions of Asia. Particles reached incredible heights. The sky darkened. Sunlight diminished. Temperatures may have fallen significantly. Some researchers believe the eruption triggered a volcanic winter that lasted for years. Imagine waking each morning beneath a sky veiled by ash. Imagine crops failing, animals disappearing, temperatures dropping, rainfall patterns changing, entire ecosystems struggling to adapt. For modern civilization, such an event would be catastrophic. For small groups of prehistoric humans, it could have been devastating beyond imagination. The theory became known as the Toba catastrophe hypothesis. According to this idea, the eruption created environmental conditions so severe that human populations collapsed across much of the world. Only scattered groups survived. Generation after generation endured extreme hardships, while much of humanity vanished. The survivors became the ancestors of everyone alive today. The theory is dramatic. It is also controversial. Not all scientists agree that Toba alone caused the bottleneck. Evidence continues to be debated. New discoveries frequently challenge older assumptions. Yet even among researchers who question the strongest version of the theory, few doubt that humanity experienced periods of severe population decline. The exact causes remain one of the most fascinating mysteries in human history. What is certain is that life 70,000 years ago was extraordinarily difficult. The Earth was entering unstable climatic periods. Ice ages advanced and retreated. Rainfall patterns shifted. Habitats changed. Resources became unpredictable. Human groups were often isolated from one another. Many populations likely disappeared without leaving any trace behind. Their stories were never written. Their names were never recorded. Their struggles vanished into prehistory. Only fragments remained. A stone tool, a campsite, a bone buried beneath layers of sediment, tiny clues scattered across continents. Yet from these fragments, a picture slowly emerges. A picture of resilience. A picture of survival against overwhelming odds. Somewhere in Africa, small communities endured changing climates. They adapted to new environments. They discovered new ways to gather food. They strengthened social bonds. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Every lesson mattered. Every skill increased the chance of survival. Fire provided warmth. Cooperation improved hunting success. Communication allowed information to spread. These advantages may seem simple today. At the time, they were revolutionary. Human beings were developing something that would eventually transform the planet, the ability to learn collectively. No individual could understand everything, but groups could accumulate knowledge across generations. One discovery led to another. One innovation created opportunities for the next. This process became humanity's greatest survival tool, and it may have helped our ancestors endure one of the most dangerous periods in our species' history. The people who survived did not know they were preserving the future of humanity. They had no concept of genetics, no understanding of evolution, no awareness that countless generations in the future would look back and wonder how their species survived. Their concerns were immediate. The next meal, the next source of water, the next shelter before nightfall. Every sunrise brought uncertainty. Every sunset represented another day survived. In many ways, survival itself was an achievement. The world around them was constantly changing. Grasslands expanded and contracted. Forests shifted. Rivers changed course. Lakes appeared and disappeared. Animals migrated in response to climate. Human groups were forced to adapt or perish. Those who could not adjust often vanished from history. The archaeological record reveals only fragments of these ancient lives. Stone tools left behind in campsites, animal bones showing signs of butchering, charcoal from ancient fires, occasional traces of shelters. From these clues, scientists reconstruct a world that no longer exists. A world where humans were not dominant. A world where survival required intelligence, cooperation, and luck. Luck may have been more important than we like to admit. Entire populations can disappear because of a drought, a disease, a harsh winter, a failed migration, a volcanic eruption, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. For thousands of years, humanity lived dangerously close to the edge. Yet something remarkable happened. Instead of disappearing, our ancestors expanded. They explored. They adapted. They spread into new territories. Around 70,000 years ago, groups of modern humans began moving beyond Africa in greater numbers. This journey would become one of the most important events in human history. The Earth was vast and unknown. Every step into a new region carried risks. There were unfamiliar predators, unfamiliar climates, unfamiliar diseases. Yet humans continued moving forward. Some followed coastlines, others crossed grasslands. Small groups entered the Middle East. Later generations reached Asia. Eventually, humans spread into Europe. Each migration represented an extraordinary challenge. These were not organized expeditions. There were no maps, no guides, no knowledge of what lay beyond the horizon. Only curiosity, necessity, and survival. As populations expanded, they encountered environments unlike anything their ancestors had known. Dense forests, towering mountains, frozen landscapes, arid deserts. Each environment demanded new solutions. Humans responded with creativity. Tools improved. Hunting techniques evolved. Clothing became more sophisticated. Shelters became more effective. Language may have become increasingly complex. The ability to share information became one of humanity's greatest advantages. Knowledge could now outlive individuals. A hunter could teach a child. That child could teach another generation. Ideas accumulated. Mistakes became lessons. Successes became tradition. Over time, these advantages multiplied. Meanwhile, other human species shared the planet. Modern humans were not alone. Europe and parts of Asia were inhabited by the Neanderthals. Far to the east lived another mysterious human group known today as the Denisovans. Other populations may have existed as well. For a period of time, multiple human species walked the earth simultaneously. They hunted, they survived, they adapted. Some may have competed, others may have cooperated. Evidence now suggests that modern humans occasionally interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. Their legacy survives within our DNA, tiny genetic traces carried by billions of people today. This discovery transformed our understanding of human history. For decades, scientists assumed modern humans completely replaced earlier populations. The reality proved more complicated. Human history was not a simple story. It was a network of encounters, migrations, adaptations, and survival. Yet despite these interactions, only one human species remains today, us. The question is why? Why did Homo sapiens survive while others disappeared? Researchers continue searching for answers. Perhaps our social structures provided an advantage. Perhaps our communication skills were more advanced. Perhaps our ability to cooperate across larger groups gave us greater resilience. Or perhaps chance played a larger role than anyone realizes. History often depends upon fragile events. A successful hunt, a fertile valley, a favorable climate shift, a generation of skilled leaders. Tiny differences can produce enormous consequences over thousands of years. Whatever the reason, modern humans gradually expanded across the globe. The descendants of those small surviving populations continued moving into new lands. They crossed mountain ranges. They followed rivers. They adapted to climates ranging from tropical heat to Arctic cold. Some groups eventually reached Southeast Asia. Others entered Europe. Thousands of years later, humans would cross into the Americas. The journey transformed a species once confined to a portion of Africa into a global presence. Yet the genetic evidence continued to tell a fascinating story. Despite spreading across the world, humanity still carried signs of an ancient bottleneck. The diversity lost during that distant crisis never fully return. In a sense, every person alive today is connected through that narrow passage in history. Every language, every culture, every nation, every civilization, all trace their ancestry back through a surprisingly small number of survivors. This realization changes how we view ourselves. Modern society often emphasizes differences: nationality, religion, language, politics, culture, but genetics reveals something deeper. The human family is extraordinarily young and remarkably connected. Two people separated by continents may share ancestors far more recently than they realize. The divisions that seem enormous in daily life become much smaller when viewed through the lens of deep time. The story of humanity is ultimately a shared story, a story written across tens of thousands of years, a story of survival against overwhelming odds. As scientific techniques improve, researchers gain new tools for exploring that story. Ancient DNA revolutionized anthropology. Bones that had remained silent for thousands of years suddenly revealed secrets. Genomes could be reconstructed, relationships could be mapped, migration routes could be traced. Questions once considered impossible to answer became scientific investigation. With each discovery, humanity's past became clearer, yet new mysteries emerged. Some researchers began asking whether the bottleneck may have been even more severe than previously believed. Recent genetic studies suggested that ancient human populations may have fallen dramatically during certain periods. Some analyses proposed that our ancestors experienced prolonged declines, lasting thousands of years. If correct, these findings would imply that humanity survived not a brief crisis, but an extended struggle. Generation after generation endured uncertainty. Entire communities may have vanished. The survivors persisted, not because they were destined to succeed, not because history guaranteed their survival, but because they adapted, they learned, they cooperated, and sometimes they were fortunate. This lesson extends beyond prehistory. Human civilization often appears permanent. Cities seem eternal. Technology feels unstoppable. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates how fragile success can be. Ancient empires rose and fell. Powerful civilizations disappeared. Environmental changes altered entire regions. The story of our species reminds us that survival is never guaranteed. The world continues to change. Climate shifts, natural disasters occur, new challenges emerge. The same adaptability that allowed our ancestors to survive remains essential today. In many ways, the greatest inheritance passed down from those distant survivors was not a particular tool or invention. It was flexibility, the ability to confront uncertainty, the willingness to learn, the capacity to cooperate. These traits helped small groups of prehistoric humans endure conditions that might otherwise have ended our story. And because they endured, everything that followed became possible. Agriculture, cities, writing, science, philosophy, art, exploration, medicine, technology. Every achievement of civilization rests upon the survival of countless generations whose names have been forgotten, people who never knew the impact they would have on the future, people who simply survived long enough to pass life to the next generation. Their victory was quiet. There were no monuments, no celebrations, no records, yet it may have been the most important victory in human history, because without them, there would be no history at all. As temperatures continued to fluctuate across the ancient world, the descendants of those survivors entered a new phase of human history. For thousands of years, they had lived as small, mobile communities. They followed migrating animals, gathered wild plants, and adapted to changing landscapes. But gradual environmental changes created new opportunities. When the last major ice age began to retreat, glaciers melted across vast regions of the northern hemisphere. Rivers grew larger, grasslands shifted, forests expanded into areas that had once been frozen. Human populations increased. With more people came new challenges. Competition for resources became more intense. Groups that had once been separated by enormous distances began encountering one another more frequently. These encounters changed humanity. Ideas spread between communities. Hunting techniques improved. Tools became more specialized. People learned from one another, and knowledge accumulated faster than ever before. One of the most important developments was the growing ability to plan for the future. Earlier generations had often focused on immediate survival. Now some groups began storing food, returning to the same seasonal camps, and developing more complex social networks. These changes laid the foundation for a transformation that would eventually reshape the entire planet. Around 12,000 years ago, in several regions of the world, humans began experimenting with a radical idea. Instead of simply gathering wild plants, they started cultivating them. Instead of only hunting animals, they began managing herds. This was the beginning of agriculture. The shift did not happen overnight. For many generations, farming existed alongside hunting and gathering. Some years the crops succeeded, other years they failed. But gradually, agriculture proved powerful enough to support larger populations. Villages appeared, then towns, then cities. For the first time in human history, large numbers of people could live in permanent settlements. It is difficult to overstate how revolutionary this was. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had lived in relatively small groups. Suddenly, thousands of people could inhabit the same location. Food surpluses allowed some individuals to become craftsmen, traders, priests, or administrators. Instead of spending every day searching for food, civilization emerged. Yet hidden within every city, every kingdom, and every empire was the legacy of that ancient bottleneck. The people building temples in Mesopotamia, raising pyramids in Egypt, and developing early writing systems, all descended from the small populations that had survived humanity's most dangerous era. The same was true for every civilization that followed. Ancient China, the Indus Valley, Greece, Rome, the Maya, the kingdoms of Africa, all were branches of the same remarkably connected human family. Modern genetics has made this connection increasingly clear. When scientists compare DNA from populations around the world, they can trace patterns of ancestry stretching back tens of thousands of years. The farther back they look, the more human lineages converge. Eventually, they reach the small groups of survivors who carried our species through its most uncertain period. This discovery has profound implications. It means that every person alive today shares common ancestors with every other person on Earth. The connection may be separated by thousands of years and countless generations, but it exists. In a biological sense, humanity is far less divided than it often appears. The ancient bottleneck left another important legacy. Reduced genetic diversity can make a species more vulnerable to certain threats. When populations become very small, harmful mutations may become more common, and the ability to adapt to future changes can be affected. Some researchers have explored whether humanity's limited genetic diversity influenced later evolutionary patterns. The question remains complex, but it highlights how events in the distant past can continue shaping the present. The story of near extinction also changes how scientists think about risk. For much of history, humans view themselves as separate from natural processes. Modern research tells a different story. Our species is deeply connected to the Earth's climate, geology, and ecosystems. A volcanic eruption in Indonesia may have affected populations thousands of kilometers away. Climate shifts altered migration routes. Changes in rainfall influenced survival. Human history was never isolated from the environment. This realization has become increasingly important in the modern era. Today, scientists study past climate changes not only to understand history, but also to learn how human societies respond to environmental stress. The ancient survivors provide one of the longest-running case studies available. They faced uncertainty on a scale difficult to imagine, and somehow they endured. Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of the story is that the survivors had no idea what they were preserving. When a small group found water during a drought, they were not saving future civilization. When parents protected their children through a harsh season, they were not ensuring the existence of science, art, music, or technology. They were simply trying to live. Yet from those ordinary acts of survival became everything that followed. The first farmers, the first sailors, the first astronomers, the first writers, the first engineers. Every generation inherited a world shaped by the persistence of earlier generations. In recent decades, new research has continued to refine the timeline of humanity's ancient crisis. Some studies suggest multiple population declines may have occurred rather than a single catastrophic event. Others propose that climate variability over thousands of years gradually reduced human numbers. The debate is ongoing. Science rarely advances through simple answers. New evidence often forces researchers to revise earlier conclusions. What remains consistent is the central discovery. Humanity passed through an extraordinarily narrow chapter in its history. Without that survival, the modern world would not exist. Consider the chain of events. A small population survives environmental upheaval. Its descendants spread across Africa. Later generations leave the continent. They encounter new environments and other human species. They adapt, innovate, and migrate. Agriculture develops. Civilizations emerge. Science advances. Eventually, humans walk on the moon, map the human genome, and search for life beyond Earth. Every step in that chain depends upon the previous one. Break the chain at its narrowest point, and everything afterward disappears. No cities, no history books, no music, no literature, no medicine, no spacecraft. Just a world in which Homo sapiens became another extinct branch of the evolutionary tree. That possibility is not science fiction. It is a realistic alternative that may have come dangerously close to becoming reality. The Earth has witnessed many extinctions. Entire groups of animals have vanished. Dominant species have disappeared. Evolution offers no guarantees. Our survival was never predetermined, and perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Humanity's greatest achievements were built upon a foundation of vulnerability. The species that now alters the climate, explores space, and develops advanced technology once depended on the survival of a relatively small number of individuals facing forces far beyond their control. The story begins not with triumph, but with uncertainty, not with dominance, but with fragility, not with billions of people, but with a handful of survivors whose future was anything but certain. Today, when we look at crowded cities, global networks, and technological civilization, it is easy to forget how improbable our existence really is. Every human being alive carries a genetic message from those distant survivors, a message that has traveled through thousands of generations, a message that says our species endure against droughts, against climate change, against environmental collapse, against extinction. The world those ancestors knew has vanished. The mammoths are gone. The giant predators have disappeared. The landscapes have changed. Oceans have risen. Forests have moved. Ice sheets have retreated. But one thing remains: the lineage, the unbroken chain connecting modern humanity to a small population that survived one of the most dangerous periods in our history. That chain stretches from ancient campfires in Africa to the present day. It passes through every civilization, every migration, every generation. And it reminds us that the greatest scientific mystery is not only how close humanity came to extinction, it is how, against all odds, humanity survived. From a few thousand survivors emerged explorers, builders, thinkers, artists, scientists, and billions of people who now inhabit nearly every corner of the earth. The story of our species could have ended in silence tens of thousands of years ago. Instead, it continued. And because it continued, someone can now listen to this story, look up at the night sky, and realize that their own existence is part of one of the most improbable survivals in the history of life on Earth. The day humanity nearly went extinct was not the end of our story. It was the moment that made every future chapter possible. Yet the deeper scientists looked into humanity's past, the more astonishing the story became. The ancient bottleneck was not simply a question of survival. It was also a question of probability. What are the chances that a species reduced to such small numbers could eventually dominate an entire planet? What are the chances that descendants of a few scattered communities would one day build skyscrapers, launch satellites, split atoms, and decode the very DNA that preserved evidence of their survival? The answer is difficult to calculate, but it is clear that the path from those ancient survivors to the modern world was anything but guaranteed. At countless points in history, events could have unfolded differently. A slightly colder climate, a prolonged drought, a failed migration, a disease outbreak, a volcanic eruption occurring at the wrong moment. Any of these might have altered the course of humanity forever. Scientists sometimes refer to this idea as contingency. History is shaped not only by large trends, but by fragile moments. Small events can create enormous consequences. The survival of a child, the discovery of a water source, the success of a hunting expedition, the decision of a group to move into a new region. Thousands of years later, those seemingly insignificant moments can influence the fate of entire civilization. The farther researchers look into prehistory, the more they recognize how uncertain the human story truly was. There was no master plan, no predetermined outcome, only generation after generation confronting challenges they could not fully understand. And perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in the study of ancient climate. Modern technology allows scientists to examine ice cores, lake sediments, cave formations, and ocean deposits. These natural archives preserve evidence from the distant past. Layer by layer, they reveal dramatic environmental fluctuations, periods of warmth, periods of cold, droughts lasting centuries, sudden climatic shift that transformed entire ecosystems. For ancient humans, these changes were not scientific data. They were matters of life and death. A changing rainfall pattern could determine whether a region remained habitable. The disappearance of key animal species could threaten food supplies. Rising temperatures might open new migration routes. Falling temperatures could close them. Human history and climate history became inseparable. The survivors of the bottleneck did not overcome a single obstacle. They survived a constantly changing world. Their success required flexibility. Groups that adapted survived. Groups that failed often disappeared. This pattern would continue throughout human history, long after the bottleneck ended, long after agriculture emerged, long after civilizations rose. Adaptation remained one of humanity's defining traits. When environments changed, humans changed with them. When challenges appeared, humans developed new solutions. This ability became our greatest strength. It allowed small communities to spread across deserts, forests, mountains, and frozen tundra. It allowed civilizations to emerge in places where survival once seemed impossible. It eventually allowed humanity to expand beyond the limitations faced by every previous generation. The irony is remarkable. A species that nearly vanished became one of the most adaptable forms of life on Earth. A population once measured in the thousands, eventually numbered in the billions, and yet traces of that ancient vulnerability remain. Natural disasters still occur. Climate still changes. Resources remain finite. The challenges are different, but the fundamental reality has not disappeared. Human survival still depends on understanding the world around us. In that sense, modern science represents a continuation of an ancient tradition. Our ancestors observed weather patterns because survival depended on. Today's scientists monitor climate systems using satellites. Ancient hunters tracked animal movements. Today, researchers study ecosystems using computers and global networks. The tools have changed. The goal remains the same: to understand the environment well enough to survive within it. The story of humanity's near extinction, therefore, becomes more than a tale about the distant past. It becomes a lesson, a reminder that resilience matters, a reminder that cooperation matters, a reminder that knowledge matters. The small groups that survived did not possess advanced technology, but they possessed something equally important: the ability to learn, the ability to share information, the ability to work together. Without those qualities, our story may have ended before it truly began. As researchers continue investigating ancient DNA, new discoveries appear almost every day. Genomes recovered from ancient bones reveal relationships that were once invisible. Unexpected migrations emerge from the data. Previously unknown populations are identified. The human story becomes richer and more complex. Yet despite all these discoveries, one fact remains unchanged. Every living human belongs to a lineage that survived, a lineage that endured when extinction was a real possibility. This connection extends across all cultures, languages, and nations. It links the modern world to ancient campfires burning beneath unfamiliar skies. It connects scientists in laboratories to hunters crossing prehistoric grassland. It connects space exploration to survival in a distant age when every day was uncertain. The chain is unbroken. For tens of thousands of years, life passed from one generation to the next. Parents protected children. Children became parents. Knowledge accumulated. Communities grew. Civilizations emerged. Empires rose and fell. Technologies transformed society. Yet the chain continued. Through wars, through famines, through pandemics, through environmental change. The chain endured because each generation survived long enough to pass it forward. When viewed from this perspective, humanity's history becomes something extraordinary, not merely a collection of events, not merely a sequence of civilization, but a continuous story of persistence, a story stretching across deep time, a story that began long before written records, long before monuments, long before history itself. And at one crucial moment, that story came dangerously close to ending. The evidence may never reveal every detail. Scientists will continue debating exactly how severe the bottleneck was. They will continue studying volcanic eruptions, climate records, and genetic data. New discoveries will refine old theories. Questions will remain. That is the nature of science. But the central mystery has already transformed our understanding of ourselves. Humanity was not always numerous. Humanity was not always secure. Humanity survived because a small number of individuals endured circumstances that could easily have erased them from existence. The world they inhabited was harsh, unpredictable, often unforgiving, yet they persisted. And because they persisted, every chapter of human history became possible. Every city ever built, every language ever spoken, every scientific discovery ever made, every work of art ever created, every dream ever imagined. All of it traces back through an unbroken chain to those distant survivors. Perhaps that is the most remarkable realization of all. When we study humanity's near extinction, we are not studying strangers. We are studying ourselves. We are examining the narrow bridge across which our species passed. A bridge suspended over the possibility of oblivion. A bridge crossed by ancestors who never knew how important their survival would become. Today their names are forgotten. Their faces are lost to time. Their voices have vanished. Yet their legacy surrounds us. It exists in every human community, every family, every individual, including the person hearing this story. The modern world often feels enormous. Billions of people, thousands of cultures, countless differences. But beneath those differences lies a shared origin, a shared struggle, a shared survival. The evidence is written in our DNA. The clues are preserved in ancient landscapes. The story is scattered across fossils, stone tools, and fragments of genetic code. Piece by piece, science has reconstructed one of the greatest survival stories ever discovered. A story not about kings or empires, not about battles or conquests, but about a species that refused to disappear, a species that endured long enough to change the world. And so, when we ask how close humanity came to extinction, the answer may never be perfectly precise. Perhaps there were a few thousand survivors, perhaps fewer, perhaps more. The exact number matters less than the reality behind it. There was a time when humanity stood near the edge, a time when the future was uncertain, a time when everything that exists today depended upon the survival of a remarkably small population. Against the vast backdrop of Earth's history, it was only a brief moment, but it may have been the most important moment our species ever experienced, because from that narrow escape came everything: civilization, science, history, and us. The day humanity nearly went extinct was not merely a crisis from the distant past. It was the turning point that made the entire human future possible, and that future is still being written. If the story ended there, it would already be one of the most remarkable discoveries in science. But there is another layer to the mystery. For most of human history, people had no idea how vulnerable their species once was. Ancient civilizations developed origin stories to explain where humans came from. Some believed humanity had always existed. Others imagined gods shaping people from clay, earth, or stone. These stories reflected humanity's attempt to understand its place in the world. Yet the true story remained hidden. It waited inside bones buried beneath ancient soil. It waited inside microscopic strands of DNA. It waited inside geological records scattered across continents. Only in the last few decades have scientists gained the tools necessary to uncover, and the more they discover, the stranger the picture became. Human beings often imagine evolution as a straight line, a simple progression from primitive ancestors to modern people. Reality was far more complicated. For millions of years, numerous human relatives existed. Some walked upright long before modern humans appeared. Some crafted tools. Some controlled fire. Some may even have created symbolic art. The evolutionary tree resembled a branching network rather than a ladder. Many branches flourished for a time. Most eventually disappeared. Only one survived to the present day. Homo sapiens. The question that continues to fascinate researchers is why? What separated our ancestors from other human species? Why did we endure while others vanished? The answer may involve intelligence. It may involve language. It may involve cooperation. Or it may involve a combination of many factors working together. Evidence increasingly suggests that social cooperation played a crucial role. Humans possess a remarkable ability to work together in large groups. Many animals cooperate, but few do so on the scale humans achieve. People routinely collaborate with strangers. They exchange information. They create shared systems of belief. They organize communities far larger than any individual could personally know. This ability did not appear overnight. It evolved gradually across countless generations, and during periods of crisis, it may have become a decisive advantage. Imagine a small group facing a prolonged drought. One individual possesses knowledge about a distant water source. Another understands seasonal animal migration. Another knows how to create more effective tools. When information is shared, the entire group benefits. Collective knowledge becomes a survival mechanism. Scientists believe this process may have helped humans endure challenges that overwhelmed other populations. Knowledge could accumulate faster than genetic evolution alone. Ideas could spread within a single generation. Mistakes could be remembered. Successful strategies could be repeated. This ability transformed humanity into something unusual. A species capable of adapting culturally as well as biologically. And once cultural adaptation accelerated, the pace of change increased dramatically. The descendants of ancient survivors eventually reached nearly every habitable region on Earth. They crossed deserts, navigated rivers, traversed mountain ranges, entered frozen landscapes that earlier generations would have considered impossible to inhabit. Each new environment demanded innovation. Humans responded with creativity. Clothing improved, shelters evolved, hunting methods became more sophisticated. Technology advanced generation by generation. By the time agriculture emerged, humanity had already demonstrated extraordinary resilience. The bottleneck had not broken the species. Instead, it may have shaped the characteristics that later fueled human expansion. Some researchers have even suggested that surviving extreme challenges can influence the future trajectory of population. When conditions become difficult, traits that improve adaptability may become increasingly important. Over thousands of years, those traits can spread. Whether this occurred during humanity's ancient crisis remains debated, but the possibility continues to inspire research. The story also raises philosophical questions. How much of history depends on chance? How much depends on necessity? Would another human species have eventually achieved what Homo sapiens achieved? Or was there something uniquely effective about our ancestors? Science cannot yet provide definitive answers. What it can show is that the path leading to the modern world was extraordinarily fragile. Consider how many events had to occur exactly as they did. A small population survives environmental stress. Migration succeeds. Knowledge spreads. Communities endure. Agriculture develops. Civilizations emerge. Scientific understanding grows. Remove enough links from that chain, and the outcome changes completely. History often appears inevitable when viewed in retrospect, but it rarely feels inevitable while it is happening. The ancient survivors did not know they were participating in one of the most important moments in human history. To them, survival was simply survival. The future remained invisible. This perspective can be difficult for modern people to grasp. Today, we are surrounded by information. We know about continents beyond the horizon. We understand the age of the Earth. We can observe distant galaxies. Ancient humans possessed none of this knowledge. Their world was immediate, local, personal. Yet despite these limitations, they carried something extraordinary into the future. Potential. The potential for every discovery that would eventually follow. Within those small populations existed future astronomers, future engineers, future artists, future scientists, not as individuals, but as possibilities embedded within the continuation of the human story. Had the bottleneck ended differently, those possibilities might never have emerged. The universe would have remained exactly the same. Stars would still shine, mountains would still rise, oceans would still move with the tides, but there would be no humans to observe them, no minds asking questions, no civilizations searching for answers. That realization highlights the significance of survival itself. Existence is not guaranteed. The continuity of life depends upon countless successful transitions from one generation to the next. Humanity's near extinction reminds us how delicate those transitions can be, and yet it also demonstrates the power of persistence. Again and again, our ancestors faced circumstances that could have ended their story. Again and again, they found ways to continue. The result is visible everywhere. Every language spoken today represents survival. Every culture represents survival. Every family represents survival. Every person alive is evidence that the chain was never broken. The story, therefore, belongs to all of humanity. It is not the history of one nation or one region. It is the shared history of an entire species, a history stretching back beyond written records, beyond cities, beyond agriculture, into a world where survival itself was uncertain. And perhaps that is why the discovery resonates so deeply, because beneath modern life, beneath technology and civilization, we recognize something familiar: the determination to endure, the determination to adapt, the determination to continue despite uncertainty. These qualities helped a small population survive tens of thousands of years ago. They remain part of the human story today. The bottleneck may have ended long ago, but its legacy lives on, in every city, in every community, in every person. A reminder that the billions of humans alive today are descendants of survivors. A reminder that our greatest inheritance is not wealth, technology, or power. It is existence itself. The simple fact that the chain continued, that against extraordinary odds, humanity remained. And because humanity remained, the story could continue. In the 21st century, scientists continue searching for answers hidden deep within humanity's past. Powerful computers compare genetic sequences from populations around the world. Researchers recover fragments of ancient DNA from bones that have rested underground for tens of thousands of years. Climate scientists reconstruct ancient environments from ice cores and sediment layers. Archaeologists uncover traces of forgotten communities that lived and died long before history was written. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, and with every new piece, one conclusion becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Humanity's existence was never guaranteed. The modern world often creates the illusion of permanence. Cities appear solid, nations seem enduring, technology feels unstoppable. But when viewed through the lens of deep time, permanence is revealed as an illusion. Species emerge, species disappear, entire ecosystems change, continents shift, oceans rise and fall. Nothing remains exactly the same forever. Human beings are part of that larger story, For a brief moment in Earth's history, our species stood near the edge of extinction. The exact details may never be fully known. Scientists still debate the severity of the bottleneck. They continue investigating the role of climate change, volcanic activity, migration, and environmental stress. Future discoveries may alter aspects of the story. That is how science works. Understanding grows gradually. Questions lead to investigation. Investigations lead to new questions. Yet even as details change, the central lesson remains remarkably consistent. Humanity survived, not because survival was guaranteed, not because nature favored us, not because history was predetermined. Humanity survived because generation after generation adapted to challenges that could have destroyed them. The people responsible for that survival never knew what they were accomplishing. They did not know that tens of thousands of years later, their descendants would build telescopes capable of observing distant galaxies. They did not know that future scientists would decode the genetic instructions carried within every human cell. They did not know that one day people would travel beyond the atmosphere of the Earth itself. They knew only the realities of their own lives. The search for food, the protection of family, the uncertainty of tomorrow. And yet those ordinary struggles became the foundation of everything that followed. Every civilization, every invention, every scientific breakthrough, every piece of music ever composed, every story ever told, every dream ever imagined, all emerged because enough people survived long enough to pass life forward. When viewed across tens of thousands of years, humanity's story becomes something extraordinary. It is not merely the story of progress. It is the story of persistence. A story written by countless individuals whose names have been lost to time. People who left no monuments, no written records, no grand declarations, only descendants, billions of descendants. Their legacy exists not in stone, but in living people, in every human being alive today. The evidence of that legacy can be found in our DNA. Within each cell lies a record stretching back through thousands of generations, a biological archive preserving traces of journeys, migrations, hardships, and survival. The same genetic code that allowed scientists to uncover the bottleneck also reveals something else: how deeply connected humanity truly is. Modern societies often focus on differences, different languages, different cultures, different nations, different beliefs. Yet beneath those differences lies a shared ancestry that reaches back into prehistory. The farther we travel into the past, the closer humanity becomes. Eventually, the countless branches of the human family tree converge. They narrow, they merge, and they lead back toward the small population that carried our species through its most uncertain chapter. That realization may be one of the most important discoveries ever made because it changes the way we see ourselves. Humanity is not a collection of isolated groups. Humanity is a single extended family with a shared history of survival. The story of near extinction belongs to everyone. Every person listening to this story is connected to it, not metaphorically, literally. The chain that links modern people to those ancient survivors has never been broken. Parents passed life to children. Children became parents. Generation followed generation. Across thousands of years, the chain continued uninterrupted. Had it failed at any point, none of us would be here. That fragile continuity is perhaps the greatest miracle in the human story. Not a miracle in the supernatural sense, a miracle of probability, a miracle of endurance, a miracle of survival. The ancient world that threatened our ancestors no longer exists. The glaciers have retreated. The mammoths have vanished. The landscapes have changed. Civilizations have risen and fallen. Technology has transformed nearly every aspect of life. Yet one thing remains unchanged. Humanity still faces uncertainty. The challenges are different now, but uncertainty remains part of existence. Climate shifts continue. Natural disasters still occur. New diseases emerge. The future remains unpredictable. In confronting these challenges, modern humans rely on the same strengths that helped our ancestors survive long ago: cooperation, adaptation, curiosity, learning, the willingness to share knowledge. the determination to continue. These qualities carried humanity through its darkest moments in prehistory. They continue shaping our future today. Perhaps that is why the story of humanity's near extinction resonates so strongly. It reminds us that survival is not something that happened once. It is an ongoing process, a continuous effort stretching across generations. The people who survived 70,000 years ago passed the responsibility forward. Every generation since has done the same, and now that responsibility belongs to us. The future chapters of the human story have not yet been written. No one knows what challenges lie ahead. No one knows what discoveries await. No one knows how humanity will change over the next 1,000 years, or 10,000 years, or beyond. What we do know is this: our species has already survived extraordinary odds. It has endured environmental upheaval, migration, scarcity, and uncertainty. It has crossed a bridge that once seemed impossibly narrow. And because it crossed that bridge, everything that followed became possible. The cities, the civilization, the sciences, the arts, the dreams, the questions, the search for understanding itself. All of it began with survival. The day humanity nearly went extinct could have been the final chapter in our story. Instead, it became the beginning of a much larger one, a story that continues today, a story still unfolding, a story carried forward by every human being alive. And perhaps, when future generations look back upon the long history of our species, they will see the ancient bottleneck not merely as a crisis, but as a reminder of how fragile existence can be, a reminder of how remarkable survival truly is, and a reminder that the billions of people living on Earth today are descendants of a small group of survivors who faced one of the greatest challenges in human history and endured. Against all odds, humanity remained. And because humanity remained, the story goes on. And